I thought I knew Ethan after 2 years together, but I was wrong. What started as a seemingly perfect relationship unraveled into a web of lies, public humiliation, and a painful awakening. This is the story of how I discovered his true colors, faced betrayal head-on, and found strength in the aftermath. A journey from heartbreak to empowerment that I never saw coming. Ethan interrupts me mid-sentence with a quick reply. Yeah, Lily felt really bad for her. I was actually doing her a favor, he laughs. Guys, my heart totally sank. That's not even close to what happened. Lily had warned me about Ethan's ego before we met, but she insisted he was a decent guy at heart. Spoiler, he wasn't. I excuse myself to the bathroom, partly to avoid breaking down in front of them. In the stall, I'm texting Lily like, what's happening? Then I get a notification. Ethan just tagged himself at the restaurant on Instagram with Guys Night Out. As if I'm invisible. Lily calls me right away, but I send her to voicemail so the guys don't hear me crying. I splash cold water on my face, fix my makeup, and give myself a shaky pep talk in the mirror about surviving this dinner with some pride. When I return, everyone's laughing about something, but it stops the second I sit down. Great. The server brings our main dishes, and Ethan starts poking fun at my order. I chose pasta, one of the cheaper items since I was already worried about the bill, and he keeps tossing out remarks like, carb loading for a marathon? Or, that's a bold choice for your body. Each jab feels like a tiny cut, and they pile up fast. I'm barely eating, just pushing food around my plate, counting the minutes until I can leave. Then Nathan asks Ethan about a work project, and Ethan brags about how his boss loved his ideas, claiming he's now leading the entire thing. Something clicks in my head. Just last week, Ethan was freaking out about this project, saying his part was only a small segment and he was nervous. Now he's the star. It's like he's living in a fantasy where he's the hero. Then the bill arrives. The waiter sets it down and Ethan picks it up, glances at it, then slides it toward me. I think he's just showing me the total. But then he says something I'll never forget. You know, I don't think this is working out. I stare, waiting for a joke that doesn't come. I've tried, but I'm just not into you anymore. We should break up. In the middle of a crowded restaurant, in front of his friends. After 2 years together, who does this? I'm completely blindsided. Are you serious right now? This is how you're doing this? He stands, grabs his jacket, and says, man, my stomach's still churning over this. Someone like you should be thankful I stuck around this long. You're not exactly a catch. Then he and his buddies walk out, laughing. I'm left with a $347 tab for their fancy appetizers and overpriced drinks. The waiter approaches with a pitying look that makes it all 10 times worse. I pay with my credit card, still maxed out from holiday shopping, and make it to my car without completely falling apart. I call Lily from the parking lot, sobbing so hard she can't understand me at first. She shows up at my place with ice cream and wine, the real MVP. Between ugly cries and stress-eating cookie dough, I tell her everything. She's furious and I have to talk her out of storming Ethan's apartment. Then she goes quiet. She starts asking about Ethan's work comments, the project he mentioned, his role at the company. Finally, she says, Sophie, I hate to tell you this, but Ethan isn't who he claims to be at work. Turns out, Ethan isn't some rising star in marketing about to get a promotion. He's an assistant fetching coffee and scheduling meetings. Those business trips, total lies, the big presentation, he was just making slides for the real team. His fancy LinkedIn title, completely made up. I felt like a fool. For 2 years, he'd been lying about nearly everything, and I never questioned it. What else was fake? After Lily left, I went full detective mode. I scrolled through our texts, photos, everything. There were so many red flags I'd ignored. Comments about money that didn't add up, late nights at work when his location was across town. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that restaurant scene, how small he made me feel, how humiliated I was. At 3 a.m., I got a text from an unknown number. Hi, this is Leo from Ethan's office. Lily gave me your number. There's stuff you need to know. That's when things got really wild. First, thank you all for the kind words on my last post. Some made me tear up, but in a good way. Many of you asked for an update, so here's what happened next in this crazy saga. After learning from Leo, who works with Ethan, that my boyfriend of 2 years was living in a fantasy world, I spent the next 4 days in a post-breakup haze. You know, the kind where you swing between crying into ice cream and obsessively scrolling old photos, wondering if any of it was real. My apartment was a mess. Dishes stacked up, clothes everywhere, and like 10 empty takeout bags because cooking felt impossible. The worst part was wanting to text Ethan something funny, then remembering what happened, like getting dumped all over again. My brain was stuck in a loop of, did that really happen? And how did I miss this? I avoided social media, knowing Ethan's posts would infuriate me. But eventually I gave in and checked Instagram. There he was, posting a gym selfie captioned, "Rise up, know your value." The nerve, I nearly threw my phone across the room. Lily came over that night with takeout and found me wrapped in a blanket like a sad taco. She's been amazing through this mess, making sure I eat actual food, listening to me rant about the same things repeatedly, and never saying, "I told you so," even though she had her doubts about Ethan from the start. While we ate, Lily showed me her texts with Leo. Apparently, they'd been talking a lot, and he had serious gossip. According to Leo, Ethan told coworkers he dumped me because I was clingy and kept pushing for marriage. Excuse me, I never made a Pinterest board called Dream House Plans. Ethan did, claiming it was for a work project. Then Leo dropped a bombshell. Ethan wasn't just lying about his job title. He was on probation for stealing credit for others' work and might get fired soon. Those late nights working, he was scrambling to fix mistakes before anyone noticed. Business trips, pure fiction. I was still reeling when my phone rang. It was Margaret, Ethan's mom. I almost didn't pick up, but I decided to be the bigger person. Margaret's always been so sweet to me, remembering my birthday, asking about my life, genuinely caring. She sounded worried, asking if everything was okay between me and Ethan. Apparently, he told his family we had a minor argument, but that things were fine. Ethan texted again, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear something nice." My parents are pumped. I didn't reply, let him believe what he wants. I spent the afternoon getting ready, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. Lily helped with my hair and gave me a pep talk when I started doubting myself. At 5:30, I got in my car and drove to his parents' house. I had to pull over once because my hands were shaking too much to drive safely. I sat there, doing breathing exercises from a meditation app I downloaded ages ago but never used. What was I doing? Was this crazy? Maybe I should just block Ethan and move on. But then I pictured him at his birthday dinner, probably spinning a fake story about our relationship, maybe even playing the victim, and my determination hardened. I got to his parents' place a little late, knowing it'd annoy Ethan. Cars were already in the driveway, looked like the whole family was there. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror, took a deep breath, and walked to the door. Ethan's dad opened it with a warm smile and a hug, ushering me inside. The house smelled like Margaret's amazing roast, and I felt a pang of sadness. I really liked Ethan's family, and this might be the last time I'd see them. I stepped into the living room, and there was Ethan, drink in hand, laughing at something his cousin said. He froze when he saw me, clearly not expecting me to show up, despite what he told his family. The shock on his face was golden. Panic flashed in his eyes before he forced a fake smile and came over, hugging me tightly while whispering, "You actually showed up. We need to talk alone." I just grinned and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I wouldn't miss your birthday for the world, especially since you've been telling everyone we have big news to share." His face went pale. Margaret clapped her hands excitedly, asking if it was what she hoped. Ethan's sister gave me a knowing glance. His dad started joking about grandkids. Ethan gripped my arm a bit too hard, trying to pull me aside, but Margaret announced dinner was ready, and everyone had to sit. As we took our seats at the dining table, Ethan watching me like a hawk, my phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "On my way, 15 minutes out." Ethan leaned over and hissed, "Why are you here?" I thought after the restaurant. I just smiled sweetly and said, loud enough for all to hear, "Oh, Ethan, I wouldn't miss the chance to tell your family about that restaurant night. I bet they'd love that story." The sheer terror on his face as Margaret started serving dinner was worth every second of anxiety it took to get there. Game on. I'm finally ready to share what went down at Ethan's birthday dinner. Sorry for the delay. I needed a mental health day after all this chaos. Plus, my Wi-Fi's been glitchy since my neighbor somehow got my password and probably downloaded the entire internet. Where were we? I was at the dinner table with Ethan's family, and he was sweating bullets over what I might say. So there I was, surrounded by Ethan's parents, Margaret and Paul, his sister Hannah, his grandma, and two cousins whose names I always mix up. Margaret's delicious roast, those creamy mashed potatoes I'd literally dreamed about, and a fancy salad no one would eat but everyone would pretend to enjoy. The first 20 minutes were pure tension. Ethan kept trying to steer the conversation while shooting me warning glares. I just smiled and passed the rolls, savoring how his jaw clenched every time I spoke. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Definitely. Margaret kept things moving, bless her heart. asking about my family, my job, the usual small talk. When she mentioned how proud everyone was of Ethan's big promotion, I nearly choked on my water. I glanced at Ethan, whose face matched the red of the table's centerpiece. Ethan jumped in, boasting about how his team was smashing goals and how his boss was practically grooming him for upper management. I nodded along, watching him dig himself deeper with every word. Paul, usually quiet, suddenly asked about the Wilson account. Apparently, Ethan had told his dad he was leading a major deal. Ethan's answer was so vague it could have been a fortune cookie, something about strategic alignment and core strengths that meant nothing. Hannah caught my eye across the table. She's always been the skeptic, the type to fact-check during arguments and call people out. She raised an eyebrow like, "Is he for real?" Margaret then brought up the future, asking about our big news and if it was about our next steps. Ethan nearly dropped his knife, muttering that it wasn't the right time to discuss it. His grandma, who has zero filter and is my favorite person in his family, cut in with, "So, are you two shacking up or what? Ethan said you were looking at apartments together." News to me. The closest we got was me suggesting we share a Netflix account to save cash. Ethan tried to pivot back to himself, bragging about how his boss gave him a company card for expenses. I couldn't resist. I asked what kind of expenses he could approve. He stumbled, mumbling about client dinners and team events. That's when I casually said, "Oh, speaking of dinners, Ethan took me to this amazing restaurant last week. What was it called, babe, where you met Nathan and Tyler?" His face drained faster than my phone battery on TikTok. Seriously, my phone can't handle 20 minutes of scrolling without crashing. Anyone else? Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Margaret hurried to answer, and I heard her exclaim, "Oh, Leo, what a surprise." Ethan looked like he might faint. Leo walked in with a folder, dressed sharply in a collared shirt. He apologized for interrupting Ethan's birthday dinner, but said he had urgent work papers Ethan needed to sign for Monday. Margaret, ever the perfect host, invited him to stay for dessert. Ethan tried to hustle Leo to the door, but Paul insisted they handle it at the table, saying, "We're all family here." Leo sat in the empty chair I'd saved next to me. I'm not gonna lie, Ethan was clutching his fork so hard I thought it might snap. That's when Paul asked Leo how the big presentation went, the one Ethan supposedly led. Leo looked confused for a second before catching on. He glanced at me, then Ethan, and I could see him make a choice. Leo said the presentation was a hit, but clarified that their boss delivered it, with Ethan and the team assisting. Paul frowned and said, "That's not how Ethan told it." I jumped in, because I'm a bit chaotic like that, and asked Leo about Ethan's promotion. Poor Leo looked so uncomfortable, torn between loyalty to a coworker and not wanting to lie to a whole family. He fiddled with his napkin and said something vague about company restructuring. Ethan cut in with a forced laugh, trying to switch to sports or anything else, but Hannah wasn't having it. She asked Leo point-blank what Ethan's actual job title was. The silence was like dropping a glass in a quiet cafe. Everyone hears it, no one reacts. Leo looked at Ethan, who was pleading with his eyes, then at me. I gave a slight nod. He cleared his throat and said Ethan was an administrative assistant in marketing. The silence. Paul set his fork down slowly. Grandma made a little HMPH sound. Hannah muttered something like, "Called it." Ethan went into panic mode, insisting Leo was mistaken, that he had tons of responsibilities, that it was all complicated. But the cracks were showing. His family started asking pointed questions he couldn't dodge. "When were you promoted?" He wasn't. "Why'd you say you had a team?" He didn't. "What about that corner office you mentioned?" Also a lie. Ethan's stories got wilder with each question. He kept glaring at me like this was my fault, which only made me want to spill more. Margaret, sweet soul, tried to smooth things over, suggesting we have cake and talk about happier things. As she went to grab it, Hannah asked me about the restaurant I mentioned. My moment had come. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. How Ethan invited me to meet his friends, how he mocked me throughout dinner, how he dumped me in front of everyone and walked out, leaving me with a $347 bill I couldn't afford. Ethan tried to interrupt, but his dad shut him down with a look of raw disappointment I'd never seen before. Ethan's defense? That I was blowing it out of proportion, playing the victim, embarrassing him in front of his colleagues by not fitting in. That leaving me with the bill was teaching me a lesson. His grandma actually scoffed at that one. Leo, who'd been quiet, finally spoke up. He backed my story, saying he'd heard Ethan boasting to coworkers about how he'd put me in my place. He even pulled out his phone, showing texts from Tyler, proof people detailing the night. Margaret came back with the cake just as Ethan tried to spin himself as the victim. She set it down and asked what she'd missed. No one spoke for a moment. Then Paul quietly suggested they needed a family talk about honesty. Ethan lost it, full-on meltdown. He accused me of turning his family against him, called Leo a backstabber, and claimed everyone was just jealous of his achievements. What achievements? He knocked over his water glass, pointed at me, and shouted that someone like me should be grateful he even bothered with me. His mom gasped. Grandma muttered what I'm sure was vintage cursing. Hannah just shook her head, unsurprised. I stayed calm and said the only thing I was grateful for was finally seeing his true colors. Ethan stormed out, slamming the door so hard one of Margaret's decorative plates broke. The aftermath was eerily quiet. Margaret apologized to me a dozen times. Paul looked drained and defeated. Hannah helped clean up the spilled water. Leo apologized for his part in the awkward scene but said he couldn't stand by while Ethan lied to everyone. The weirdest thing happened. They asked me to stay for cake. So there we were, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, his coworker, and his family eating birthday cake without the birthday boy. It could have been weird, but it felt oddly okay. After dessert, I helped Margaret tidy the kitchen. She kept apologizing, saying she had no idea Ethan was lying so much. She looked heartbroken, not just about what he did to me, but about who her son had turned into. I felt for her. It's tough for parents to face their kids' flaws. She quietly asked if there were warning signs before, and I admitted there were red flags I ignored because I wanted to believe in him. As I was leaving, Paul pulled me aside. He thanked me for being truthful and apologized for his son's actions. He looked crushed, like he was wondering where they went wrong raising him. I told him it wasn't their fault. Ethan made his own choices. Leo offered to walk me to my car, probably sensing I needed a moment to process. As we walked, he said Ethan had been in trouble at work for months, stealing credit for others' ideas, lying about his contributions, even faking client emails. He was on his final warning before getting fired. Suddenly, Ethan's obsession with seeming successful made a twisted kind of sense. His whole identity was built on this fake image of greatness. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I thanked Leo for having my back and drove home, feeling both emotionally wrung out and strangely relieved, like taking off tight shoes after a long day. Sorry for the weird metaphor, but you get it. When I got home, I had 3 missed calls from Lily asking for updates. I was about to call her when my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "You've ruined everything. This isn't done." I didn't reply. I just blocked his number and made myself some tea. I should have been scared or upset, but honestly, I was just tired. And a little proud of myself for standing up to him. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. But this morning, my phone was flooded with 13 missed calls from Ethan's mom, sister, Leo, and a few unknown numbers. Something had happened overnight. And judging by the increasingly frantic voicemails, Ethan had completely lost it. I'm finally ready to explain those 13 missed calls. Thanks for your patience. I needed time to process this mess. Also, sorry for the delay. My laptop decided to do a surprise 4-hour update right when I sat down to write. So where were we? I woke up to my phone blowing up with calls from Ethan's family and Leo. At first, I thought something tragic had happened. As I sifted through the notifications, my stomach sank. There were 5 missed calls from Margaret, 3 from Hannah, 2 from Leo, and 3 from numbers I didn't know. I called Margaret first since her voicemail sounded the most urgent, all variations of, "Sophie, please call me as soon as you can." She picked up right away, sounding exhausted. Apparently, after storming out of his birthday dinner, Ethan went on a massive bender. He showed up at his ex-girlfriend's apartment around 2 a.m., drunk and yelling about how I destroyed his life. Turns out I didn't even know this ex existed, and she was understandably freaked out, calling Hannah to come get him. But that wasn't all. Ethan spent the night sending unhinged messages to nearly everyone we know. He texted Leo, threatening to sabotage his career. He posted a long, rambling rant on Facebook about being surrounded by betrayers and how people would regret crossing him. Worst of all, he sent my address to his friend Tyler in a private message, threatening to make me pay for embarrassing him. Tyler, who seems to have some decency, immediately forwarded it to Margaret, which explains why she was so desperate to reach me. I was sitting on my couch in my ratty pajamas, hair still in yesterday's messy bun, trying to process all this while Margaret apologized a million times for her son's behavior. I should have been scared, I guess. But honestly, I was just drained. Like when your phone's stuck at 1% for hours, just waiting to die so you can charge it and move on. Margaret's visit to check on me was sweet, but forced me to speed clean my apartment. Nothing motivates you to tidy up like knowing someone's mom is about to see your place, right? As I was shoving laundry into my closet and wiping toothpaste off the sink, my doorbell rang. Hannah was with her. They brought coffee and those amazing pastries from the bakery near their house, which, honestly, are probably what I miss most about dating Ethan. We sat at my wobbly kitchen table, and they filled me in on the Ethan situation. According to Hannah, Ethan has a history of lying about his life. In college, he told everyone he was on the soccer team when he didn't even make the cut. He once claimed to be dating a popular girl who had no clue who he was. He's always had this habit of crafting a fictional version of himself. More successful, more popular, more everything. While they talked, my phone kept buzzing with texts from people who'd seen Ethan's social media meltdown. Lily was freaking out, wanting to come over with her boyfriend, who does martial arts, just in case. She watches too many crime shows, I swear. My group chat was full of confused reactions to Ethan's cryptic posts. Then the doorbell rang again. I froze, thinking it might be Ethan. Hannah checked the window and sighed. It was Leo.